Well, I won a scholarship to the FAA Academy. Oh, this is going to date me. I believe it was 1963. As a Civil Air Patrol Cadet, they get one person out of each state, and I won the one for California. And went back there. That was kind of a cultural experience. They taught us celestial navigation, an old DC-6 with a dome at night shooting the stars, and you know, that was a cultural experience. It showed a side of flying to me that I wasn't too enthused about. Never was keen about driving a bus. And so anyway, I tried to get into the Air Force Academy. My eyesight wasn't good enough. I did have an alternate appointment to West Point, and then on my way to work in the summertime, some gentleman had the sun in his eyes, never saw the stop sign, so there went my free military education. But I've always enjoyed flying. Yeah, that was a motorcycle accident. Okay. The gentleman never saw it, ran the stop sign, and I just happened to show up in the intersection on a motorcycle, and got clobbered pretty good. One, I think people have a hard time relating to it. We have a lot of video games and stuff, and that takes away one of my pet peeves in aviation. I was taught you aviate, you navigate, and you communicate. I remember a gal named Betty Lambert gave me my private pilot check ride, and she was the first woman in the United States to be type-rated in a Learjet, pretty infamous lady. And she kind of looked like the little lady on Mrs. C's Candies, half-rimmed glasses, white hair, and flying a little tail dragger. And I got it all mixed up on the runway, sliding all over the place, and so I just poured the power to it and took off and went around again. She never touched the controls, and you know, she's just sitting there, and she turns to me and she says, "You recover well from bad landings, John Proctor." And so anyway, I've used that as a life metaphor, because sometimes life deals you challenges you don't expect. I had stage 4-2B cancer. That's the bottom of the barrel, and I survived that. And I think I survived it because a lot of people were pulling for me. I was on a lot of prayer chains and everything else, but I've always been a spunky kid, and when I wrote my book, Victor, Vodka, and Raw Fish, I had dedicated it to my mother to instill the curiosity in me to always look around the corner. And so that, I think, is probably where some of my adventurism comes from. That is a difficult question. You know, it really depends. Is flying something classy with a lot of history and nostalgia, probably the Beechcraft Stagger Wing was the more memorable airplanes. My good old trusty 185 behind me has been all over the place with me, and it's like putting on an old shoe. It's a comfortable airplane to travel in. The aerobatic biplanes are fun. Probably the most fun airplane I've ever owned was the little blue Hats biplane I put on floats. Impractical as heck, but gosh, it was a lot of fun to fly. The FAA gives out two licenses. They give an A and P, which is an airframe and power plant, and they give an A and E, which is airframe and electronics. But you know, if you are an A and P, I think you understand how airplanes should be treated more. You're more cautious about what you do with the airplane, and you have a little more confidence in, you know, I think, than an average person that's not one, because you understand that, you know, the airplanes have magnetos, or at least electronic ignition with some kind of a backup, so you may lose all the electrical system, and that's happened to me, but the engine keeps running, so hence back to navigate. So I'm a real big thing, even at 72 years old, about situational awareness, because we've got all these video games that joke about all the kids and their cell phones and they never take their nose out of it, but do pilots really learn how to fly, or are they systems managers? And that's my big argument, is if I cover up all the instruments on the airplane and you can't see anything, can you fly this airplane? Can you take it and land it safely? It's amazing how many people, especially younger people, panic. Oh my God, I got to see this little box to see what I'm doing. I don't know how fast I'm going to. I said, can't you feel the airplane? Airplanes talk to you. You know, so if you learn to fly, and probably one of the best teaching tools for me personally was a 1946 J3 Cub, had 65 horsepower on the front, no electrical system. And you put two people in that in the mountains in Oregon, it teaches you to fly real quick. Because you don't have the power to get out of trouble, you better learn to fly the airplane. And so maybe it's seat of the pants or whatever you call it, but you really are one with the airplane. You understand what the airplane will do and what it won't do. And if you put it somewhere where it won't do, it'll do exactly what it won't do. It'll crash. So, you know, you need to understand your limits and your airplane's limits. And that's probably one of the things that is hard to drum into people, especially when you get into egos. But I said, you know, you can BS everybody on the ground and tell whopper stories and do all this stuff. But when you're up there, and you're in the airplane and the weather goes bad or it gets dark or whatever, that's when the rubber meets the road. So you should know your limitations and always have an alternate plan or two. You know, what if? And people today with all this modern navigation aids and stuff, they get in the airplane, they're in a little cocoon, they don't dress properly if they're going over the mountains in the winter. Something happens and they wind up and they die of hypothermia when they could have easily survived. Or if they would have just had a little situational awareness, had an idea where they are and what altitude, they might have made an airport or at least a field instead of plowing into the side of a mountain and killing everybody on board. So I don't mean to sound scary about aviation, but situational awareness is absolutely critical, and that means you're listening to the engine. You know, I've done some ocean flying, and what did they hang a nickname? We call us rounders, the people that have flown private aircraft around the world. Well, I'm a double-headed rounder. I did one in a land plane with this 185, and I did one in my Grumman Albatross in a big seaplane. But you know, once you leave shore, it's amazing how the engine just seems to change tone and all the other stuff. And you're out over a big ocean, you go, or it gets dark at night, and you go, you know. But that's where I think the A&P comes in, because you understand the engine better and you have more respect for the machine. And if you have respect for the machine and respect for your limitations, you'll live to be an old duffer like me.